Khusrau was a man of many interests. My focus will be on khayal and tarana, a bit of it. Or I will also add some ragas. Let me begin with his writings. There is a word called khayal in his works. But that khayal is in the context of some sort of style of writing which Khusrau had introduced. He said that there are 9 rasas, as we know. This is the 10th rasa, the style, the free play of imagination, khayal. Now the next work was written, the first Persian work on Indian music, 50 years after the death of Amir Khusrau, Ghunyat al-Munya. So in this work also, there is no mention of khayal. Now coming to the 16th century, that is Aini-Akbari. There are many genres, because Abul Fazl was not only a historian and all that, but he had very good knowledge of music. And he was conversant with the genres present in various regions of India. So I'll just read out 2 lines from the Aini-Akbari. He says, those of Bengal are called Bangala, and those of Jaunpur, Chutkula, while the songs of Delhi are called Qawl and Tarana. That these last 2 were introduced by Amir Khusrau of Delhi, with the assistance of Samit and Tatar, and by combining several styles of Persia and India. Now, after about 100 years, Fakhirullah, the author of Rag Darpan, he gives credit for the innovation of khayal to Amir Khusrau. There is a full description, the structure, the contents, everything is there. How many lines should be there, what should be the subject matter of khayal, everything is written down. And there should not be any tata tilli. By tata tilli, he means the syllables of tarana. So there was some sort of similarity between khayal and tarana. That is why he has specifically mentioned this. Tata tilli should be avoided. And the exponents of khayal and chutkula were the same. That means there was some sort of similarity between these 2 genres. मैंने एक तराने में अमीर खुसरो साहब का एक वो रुबाई गाई है, पर वो भी द्रुत ताल में है, उसके बाद एक कोई और राग द्रुत ताल में है. दोनों ही देखिए आप एक सा है, मतलब गायकी एक सी है. ख्याल है, छोटा ख्याल, उसको आजकल हम लोग छोटा ख्याल कहते हैं. ये जो आप लोगों ने अभी बंदिशें सुनी है, ये और कुछ नहीं है, ये छोटा ख्याल है. और इसको ख्वाली ख्याल भी कहते थे शुरू में. और क्यों लंबे लंबे होते थे पहले, क्यों नहीं 2 लाइन 4 लाइन की होती थी? क्योंकि ये ख्वाली के साथ इसका संबंध था. ख्वाल लोग इसको गाते थे, उसमें पद का होना आवश्यक था. नाउ ऑन टू तराना. It's a very interesting genre, mostly meaningless these days. It belongs to the khayal family. In Vedic period, for Samgan there were some syllables. ath, yah, u, e, a, had, is him. All these had philosophical meanings. छांदोग्य के उपनिषद में इनके सब के अर्थ दिए हुए हैं. They are not meaningless. उसके बाद शुष्क अवकृष्ट ध्रुवा, शुष्काक्षर नाट्य शास्त्र में है, वो भी बहुत पुराने हैं. दिगले दिगले झंडे झंडे, इसकी भी बड़ी स्टोरीज वगैरह है. उसके बाद हमारे प्रबंधों में 6 अंग है, यानी पार्ट्स हैं. उनमें से एक तेन है, वो भी सुनने में मीनिंग जैसा लगता है, बट इट हैड सम मिस्टिक स्पिरिचुअल मीनिंग. तेन्न तेन्नेति ये वर्णा गीते असौ तेन्नको मतः. ये जो तेन्न तेन्न करके वर्ण है प्रबंध में, ये गीते असौ, गीत में यानी प्रबंध में उसको हम तेनक कहते हैं. दीज वर ऑस्पिशियस सिलेबल्स, मिस्टिक सिलेबल्स. इतना सब पृष्ठभूमि अमीर खुसरो साहब के पास अवेलेबल है. अब मुझे उस्ताद साहब ने बताया था देयर आर 3 टाइप्स ऑफ तरानास. एक तो विथ तंदेर दांदीर दाना वगैरह करके, which apparently is meaningless, but if we search we'll get meanings for those meaningless syllables also. The second one is tarana syllables and Persian रुबाइया. आजकल उसके बाद उर्दू के भी है, एंड आई नो सम संस्कृत पद सहित तराने. तीसरा हुआ जिसमें त्रिवट की तरह पर्कशन के बोल्स मिलाए जाते हैं.
I would like to comment on the work of 2 contemporary scholars on Khusrau. They were not necessarily known to be Khusrau scholars, but they both have interesting comments to make about Khusrau. One was, of course, Bhatkhande. The other was Acharya Brahaspati. Acharya Brahaspati says that Khusrau's biggest intervention in Hindustani music was him getting to propound the 12 scales of Iranian music. And that was such a big revolutionary step that it was not only adopted and agreed to by Gopal Nayak, but it gets established in the Chaturdandi Parampara. And then it is replicated by Venkatamukhi and then later Purandardas. So what Acharya Brahaspati says is that this 12 Iranian scales that got to be accepted during Khusrau's time as the 12 main scales of Indian music was anticipating Bhatkhande's 10 thoughts. Many centuries later, of course, comes Sultan Hussain Sharki, as she mentioned, and then Nemat Khan Sadaran and Adaran. Adaran, by some sources we learn, was the nephew of Sadaran through his brother Khusrau. And Khusrau Khan, apart from sharing the name with Khusrau, is also thought to be or mentioned as being the propagator of the modern sitar. The first clip that I would like to play is the Sohni Qawwali by Ustad Imdad Khan. This was recorded in 1902. It was one of the first recordings that the British company recorded in 1902. Clip that I want to play of Muhammad Hussain Sarahans is indicative of 2 things. That it is indicative of this Bhairav scale coming into Tarana, and it also he precedes the Tarana by a rubai of Amir Khusrau's in Persian. Before the Tarana he reads a couplet in Persian which ends in the tarana, with the tarana bowls, as it were.
خسرو بلخی مختلف شده امیر خسرو بلخی ترانه امیر خسرو برای شما می‌سرد. یک روایی حضرت امیر خسرو بلخی خواهش میکنم که چوب کرده گوش کنید، خاموش باشید. آن روز که روح پاک آدم به بدن گفتم درا نمیشد از ترس وطن، خواندم ملائکان به لحن داود در تن درا در تن این کلمه
कव्वाली और ख्याल इतने इंटरचेंजेबल थे कि ये कॉम्पोजिशन जो अब बजेगी वो सरपर्दा राग में है। सरपर्दा बिलावल और बिहाग का मिश्रण। एक तो राग ही अशोभ है, आजकल बहुत कम सुनने को मिलता है। दूसरा, उन कव्वालों को भी शायद नहीं पता कि हम सरपर्दा गा रहे हैं। अच्छा, और तीसरा, इस पर्टिकुलर कॉम्पोजिशन ये इतनी खुसरवी है अपनी तबीयत में, इट्स सो खुसरवी इन इट्स एटीट्यूड दैट द मिक्सचर ऑफ इस्लामिक इमेजरी विथ हिंदू भक्ति इमेजरी इज सो सीमलेसली created, and then it progresses in the antara into a tarana.
Whether Thumri certainly derives a lot from existing folk styles, and so I believe does the Hindavi Kalam of Amir Khusrau. And there are a lot of stories told of how he would actually go to the well and listen to the women who came there and who were singing, and based on that he would make his own compositions. But apart from this very basic voice that's used, and the other important thing which I think the Hindavi Kalam and Qawwali sung of this Hindavi Kalam and Thumri share is the centrality of the address, the Sambodhan. These are forms that are very clearly addressed to somebody, addressed within the text and addressed then within the performance, and the constant moving in and out of character and singer, of the address within the text and the address within the performance, I think is what lends it its special quality. And that is, you see that very clearly in both. I'm always reminded every time I listen to now Farid Ayaz or certainly recordings of Basi Sahab or Jafar Hussain Khan Sahab, I always remember what Naina ji would say, when she was talking about the bol banao of Thumri, ki kaisi kari jati hai, and she would say, bol banao agar samajh nahi hai to Jafar Hussain Khan Sahab. And it's true, it's absolutely true. And what I'd like to do is, I'll request Irfan if you could play this clip. It's of another, it's a Qawwali, it's a Qawwal singer from Pakistan, Ghaus Mohammad Zee, and this is... Bandish that we just heard, there is this imploring to the Khwaja, and specifically it speaks of the Maili Chunari. This Maili Chunari is such an important theme, and it runs through so much of the poetry. Whether it's the Sufi poetry, whether it's the Nirguni poetry, whether it's the Bhakti poetry, and whether it's the Thumri poetry also. And I just want to mention here another bandish of the Thumri repertoire, which is very interesting, because we tend very often to see the Maili Chunari as a blot, literally, a problem, a negative thing, and that it has to be washed away, and so on and so forth. And indeed, yes, I mean, this is true. We live in this world, and we are stained by the world and by our lives in the world, and alas, I mean, we have to live in this world. However, there is this very wonderful बनारस की दाता है कि वो कहते हैं कि पड़ गईले नैहरवा में दाग धूमिल भैले चुनरिया, कि हम नैहर में हैं और हमारे चुनरी में दाग पड़ गई है. I think we all know this quite wonderful kalam of his, which is only partly Hindari. It's a particular style that I think is not. I think it has existed before Amir Khusrau, but you find it increasingly becoming used in more and more interesting ways. That is the play with in a text of the registers of language, the linguistic registers. And so I'm thinking of this very well-known one, Zihali Miskin Makun Taghaful, जहाँ के there is one line in Farsi and one line in Braj Bhasha. Now we also do know that because of the conventions of Farsi poetry and the conventions of Braj Bhasha poetry, and also the grammatical conventions where the gender is not so clear in Farsi. In Farsi we assume that it is a male narrative voice speaking to a female beloved, and in the Braj Bhasha part of it, it's the other way around. Now, actually, what happens here is that Khusrau is actually posing not just languages, but also all kinds of spaces through these registers. Yes, genders, court, and the intimacy of the home, the formality of the court and the intimacy of the home, the language of women and the language of men in a rough way. And to me, actually, what seems to be happening is this complete questioning of who is the self, and what kind of gendered self is this that speaks. Something that again I would say is what we hear from the Banara Geet.